So, what do you have to do to make a fulcrum? Give me anything that crosses your mind.
Stillness.
Touch.
Breathe. Ground yourself.
What's that?
Stability in yourself.
I have to get really conscious and have like, you know, you could do peripheral vision, it's like peripheral consciousness of all of things. So it's a different state of awareness. But I have to consciously kind of like click into.
Interface.
Traction.
I was going to say lengthening. Traction's a better one.
Pressure.
Moving in length.
Bone to bone.
That gentle curve. I don't know what it is. Arc. Is that an arc or curve?
I have to watch the whole body.
Watch for working signs.
More that I'm watching, because I'm trying to become more aware that touching the one part is affecting the whole, and the fact that when I'm doing the, you know, I'm at the feet, so I'm like, normally, oh, it's feet, but now it's grown into, oh, I've got to be actually aware of the whole of it. So I'm watching up there too.
What does it travel? Are there any stuck points?
Being behind yourself. And not wishing to change. Not wishing to
Influence?
Yeah.
Non-judgmental, non-influence.
Yeah, being neutral.
Actually,
Not wishing to change, so it's more attention than intention. Yeah?
It reminds me of when I tried to tidy up your legs, Richard, because I wanted them to be straight. And you said to me, might be a very good reason why they are like they are.
Yeah, my legs like being untidy, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, fine. Something about energy. So I don't know about other people, and I'm brand new, obviously, but when I, you know, for the half moon vector, for example, I'm aware that there is a connection between the energy of the person in the table and my own energy. I can feel that energetic connection, even though I can't see anything.
I always find with the half moon vector that I'm drawing energy down. You know, some people's energy is up here. For me, it just feels like I'm moving energy evenly through the body down to downwards. I'm drawing that sort of phase.
Anything else?
Earth star, heaven star, being between.
Earth star. Not really core zero balancing, that's Jackie zero balancing.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Earth star and Soul star,
Okay.
they're terms which Jackie really likes and I bring in occasionally, but they are really good centres to work from. Yeah.
Being in my bones, remembering my bones.
So this simple half moon we've just done has quite a lot involved in it. There are certain key things we do in zero balancing, which you've just named most of them. Evaluate, balance, reevaluate. It's what we do. The half moon vector at the feet doesn't have that, but it is an evaluation in itself. How far does it travel? How does the energy move? How heavy are the legs? There's lots of different evaluations we're doing. We have position, pause, action. Back here, we've got so much in our positioning. Our awareness, our peripheral consciousness, our stability in itself, being behind yourself. So here the position is about our body usage, our nestle. What else is in position? Attention, not intention. Positioning involves bone to bone, taking out the looseness, blue line. These are all positionings. Pause. Zero balancing is built on pauses. It allows the client to catch up with us. It allows the clients, when we're in action, when we're introducing the fulcrum here, what do we do after that? We hold it still, another pause. So position, pause, action has this sense of, what does it take to make a fulcrum? We have to have bone. We have to have stillness. We have to have multiple planes. Planes of direction. So what's in a fulcrum? How do we build a fulcrum? Once you know how to build a fulcrum, you can build a fulcrum anywhere. So we've got position to the blue line. That's a really complex series of things to do. We have to first get our own position. We have to find a stable leg position. We have to find a rounded arm position. Make sure we're not too raised. Our shoulders aren't up around here. That we're comfortable with the couch. That we're in the right position on the chair. So we're not trapped by the chair. All this positioning of our own bodies before we position ourselves in relation to their bodies. Where are our fingers? Are they wrapped around the calcaneus? Are they involved with the Achilles? Are they on the skull or are they in the soft tissues of the neck? Are they on the rib or are they between the ribs? Are we on the sacroiliac joint or are we on the posterior iliac spine? Where are we positioned on the body? And knowing where we are is really, really nice and important. Once we're there, are we at bone or are we at soft tissue? Are we bone to bone? Where's my bones in relation to their bone? We're still in position. We're picking up the weight of the legs. We're engaging our body weight to the blue line. We're still in position. Position. Once we've got all that, we're at pause at the blue line. And then we build our fulcrum. And for example, in the hip, we're building multiple planes. We're taking up the slack in the whole body, putting traction into the hip, We're adding extra length with internal rotation to the hip. We're holding, 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 and then we're releasing in reverse order. This holding still is the time when the work starts. If we don't hold it still, the client won't work in the same way. So we have to build our fulcrum and then hold it still. So when we put in our half moon and engage this half moon into their bodies, with our body in a nice position, nestled to the bones here, engaged in the half moon, hold it very still. We stop adding any more traction. We stop pulling energy down their body, if that was in our minds. We come to a complete stillness. The client goes, and the client body goes, this person's not asking anything of me, this person's not doing anything to me, I can use this. And then they start to relax, let go and move. But they won't do that until we've held still. So the key point of really getting fulcrums to be significant for the client is to give the client space to work. We're listening. It's like sitting with a friend and listening to them talk. We're not interrupting all day, asking more questions. We just let them talk, giving them space. Let their bodies do the work. We're such in the habit of wanting to do it for the person, wanting to make them better, wanting to help them with this, trying to fix this, trying to do that, trying to do something more to make it happen. But actually, just holding attention. Ashan Samedo says, if we hold something without wanting it to be different, that very attention has a profound transformative effect. We're always being asked, ever since we've been born, our parents have wanted something of us. Everything since we've been wandering around on our own legs, people have asked things of us. Would you get these grades in this? Would you go and cook? Would you go and do washing up? Would you go and make your bed? Would you go and tidy? Whatever it is, people are asking stuff of us. And when somebody stops asking stuff of us, we find ourselves. So this place here of holding still is when we stop asking the client to get better, to be different, to release that hip, to do anything, to make that neck better. Please make your neck better and then I'll feel better. When we stop asking any of that and just say, I'm here, then the client can make their own internal decisions. Then they find their own want. Then they find their sole purpose. That cascade right from this just stopping can be fantastic. We've all experienced different shifts in our psyche, different shifts in our soul connection, different shifts in our sense of spark inside of us from zero balancing. And that arises from this one point, holding still. When we hold the still at a foundation joint, we know we're at the boundary between the conscious and the unconscious, because there's no voluntary control of a foundation joint. Definition of a foundation joint is something which we have no voluntary control over. It has a very small range of motion, and it has a wide broadcast of effect. So if the sacroiliac joint is out, every other bit of the body is out. Semi-foundations, much the same story, just slightly more movement, some voluntary control of them as a mass. We can move all our ribs at once, but not one. But they still have a wide broadcast. So these foundation and semi-foundations are really the bridges between the conscious and the unconscious. When we come to the 3D movables, elbows and shoulders and hips, ankles, knees, then we're wondering, well, this hasn't got that same bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. We can evaluate the hand in flexion and extension and side bending, inversion, eversion, all those different angles, but that's all within the voluntary range of the client. We can go to the end range of motion. Do you remember that whole thing? We've got the voluntary range of motion, and as we come in here, we've got the end range of motion, just here, where we move out of the voluntary into the involuntary. But we're not going to put in a fulcrum here because it's not going to do much good in there, and we can, in that involuntary range, it's not really a healthy place to be working. But we do have one magical place to work with zero balancing, and that's in joint play. If Rob's fitting a door in his new house, and he gets the absolutely finest measurement so that door fits exactly in that slot of the door frame, it's absolutely useless. Because once it's fitted in there, it's stuck. It doesn't open because there's no space, no joint space for the door to go into and come out of. So every door has to have some kind of joint space. It can't fit exactly. If a joint fits exactly, like a lovely mitre joint or a lovely, what are they called? Mitre joints? Dovetails? Dovetails, mitre joints. If they're exact, then they don't move, which is what we want on a drawer, for example, in the chest of drawers. We want it not to move and wobble. But our body wants to be able to move and wobble, so there has to be space between the joints. This space between the joints allows us to evaluate the joint play. A piston inside of an engine, if it was tight up against the edge of the cylinder, it wouldn't move, too much friction. So there has to be micro motion, micro gaps, allowing that piston to move up and down without wearing away at the surface constantly. You have to have that space so it doesn't overheat when we're running. So this joint play is not a voluntary thing. We can't lengthen our finger and pull it back in joint play. So this is the place where we get the magic in the freely movable joints. Does that make sense?
Could you repeat it, please?
Yeah.
Is that last bit where
Let's just have a visual
the
to. If we've got where the metatarsal, metacarpal, let's call it metacarpal for today, carpal, meets the first phalanges, there's this space here. If there's no space there, it couldn't move because it would be jammed together like this. Just have your fists together for a moment. Get your knuckles really slotted in next to each other and try and rotate your fists. If you're pushing hard, there's no space there, it won't rotate. Now just release that space, just give it a micro space, a tiny space, and suddenly feel you can rotate. And that joint play we evaluate like this. We pull it apart and put it back together again, pull it apart, to see how big that space is. This joint play.
Can I just check with you? So the joint play as the space between the joint, rather than the space at the end of the range of the motion.
Yeah.
So that's the distinction.
Yeah. This is ligamental.
Yeah.
That's ligamental.
Mm-hmm.
This is the ligament bringing it. Tendon or ligament? Oh, anyway, one of those elastic things called tendons or ligaments, one of the two, is beginning to engage like the brakes, and it just stretches and comes to a nice easy stop. We go the other way, it stretches and comes to a nice easy stop. When we're doing the hip evaluation, we're bringing it around. Oh, it's coming to a good stop. Oh, it's coming to a sudden stop. That elasticity is gone. We know that is end range of motion, and that's a compromised end range of motion on the external, for example, in this story. But we can't do this. It's not so effective in freely movable joints. It's well worth reading it, but if we introduce a fulcrum in the end range of motion, then we have a risk of having a negative effect.
Overstretching.
Say again?
Well, overstretching, you damage the muscle tissue. Yeah, yeah. As opposed to if you stretched it. So if you're.
I get.
Hang on a minute. We'll come back to your question. Just let Mandy finish that.
So if I'm working on this, I'm stressing the joint.
Yeah.
therefore you can do damage. So you would do the wrist in a different way. But still, you're not looking at the ligamentous, you're not looking at the joint range of motion. You're looking at the allowing the space between the joints is the area you're working in.
So with the hip, we evaluate the end range of motion, but our fulcrum is a micro rotation. It's nowhere near the end range of motion.
Yeah, exactly. But you are essentially creating space within the joint by making that move.
And we're engaging the ligaments.
Yeah, by it's sort of
Spiral.
traction, isn't it? It's that traction that sort of opens up that space, would you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, Jess, what was your confusion?
Where do you put the fulcrum? So you stretch it out so you've got the space.
We haven't got there
And
yet.
then you
That's
put-
why you're confused, because we haven't quite got there yet.
Okay.
That's the next bit.
I'll slow down.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the hip joint, we make a fulcrum by engaging the whole body, taking out the looseness, engaging the hip joint with traction, and then we add extra traction with internal rotation to bring second plane into effect. So a fulcrum needs more than one plane. If we just bring a straight pull, it's a straight line. And the body doesn't really have any straight lines. So if we're going to engage anything on the body, it's got to have two planes to give us a curve or a half moon or a spiral or many different forms we can create. How's it sounding? Sounding all right so far? But no fulcrums yet. So freely movable joints are more complex than our foundation joints and semi-foundation joints. They've got more ranges of motion. They've got flexion and extension and eversion, inversion, and other ones too. And they've got different qualities to them. They are, for example, here on the elbow, we've got a hinge joint here, but this one's different. I've just lost the name of that joint there. Anybody know the...
The electron.
We've got a hinge joint, we've got a saddle joint, we've got a planar joint, we've got a pivot joint,
That's a pivot joint.
and we've got a condyloid joint, which is metacarpal to phalangeal. We've got a ball and socket joint, and the elbow is a pivot. So this is a pivot, this is a hinge joint. The atlas axis around the odontoid peg is a pivot joint because it's pivoting around them. Saddle joints are the carpo-metacarpal joints. So it's between the metacarpals here and here. It's a saddle joint. We've also got them in the ear and in the shoulder. Ball and socket, hip, shoulder, condyloid, metacarpal, phalangeal. There's some lovely joints out there. Some are fibrous, some are cartilaginous, and some are synovial. So fibrous ones, for example, the cranial sutures, those are fibrous joints held by fibres. They don't have fluid-filled sacs, which is what synovial joints are. Some are cartilaginous, the intervertebral discs, for example, this is cartilaginous stuff in here. And some are synovial, like the knee joint and the shoulder joint. They've got synovial fluid in them. Just introducing these names, they're not too important for zero balancing, but you'll come across them in the book and you come across them when you start reading about joints. So they're quite nice just to kind of get the words out there into our mouths and into our heads. We don't need to know anything about them really for zero balancing, except when we need to know what type of joint it is sometimes to design a fulcrum for it.
Allows you how to build it.
Yes. We can evaluate a freely movable joint passively or actively. So we can palpate locally, or we can move it. We can evaluate its range of motion, and we can evaluate its end range of motion. So we've got 3 different evaluations: local palpation and stroking and feeling for heat, and comparing one side to the other for swelling, for example. This is all passive evaluation. Palpate, heat, swelling, a sliding motion. When I'm doing acupuncture on trigger points on the back, I run my hand down the back, and the tension just pops straight out into my hands. I know where it is. Just by one slide over the back, I can just feel something under the tissues is much denser or tighter. So that's a sliding evaluation. And then just straight there, I know where it is. Actively, most of this is in your manual, so you can just sit and enjoy if you want. Active, we can explore the range of motion. We can explore the end range of motion, and the end range of motion is more ligamental. And we can explore the client moving it, or us moving it. When somebody says to me, "Oh, I've got something going on with my neck," I'll just while they're sitting on the couch, I'll just say to them, just turn your leg as far as it's comfortable to the left, without any strain or pain, as far as comfortable to the left, to the right, without any strain or pain. And that is the client doing evaluation, and I can see visually, if it's going there one way and all the way around there the other way, then we know, oh, okay, it's restricted to the left. When we get them to the couch, we evaluate the neck one way and the other way. We're doing it. And on the full cervical spine, we're exploring the range. On the upper cervical spine, we're exploring the end range of motion of the atlas and axis. Slightly different moves. One has just a flowing motion. What's the range of motion? The other one is get it in position and then that little nudge into the end range of motion. They're different things.
In the physio world, we would use, so if they can only move it so far, but I can move it further, I've taken out the muscle. So then their restriction will be a muscle problem as opposed to a bone problem. If we get the same with both, then I'm looking more at, okay, there's a bone restriction.
Well, thank
Maybe
you.
that, maybe not.
Thank you.
Mm. When we're looking at freely movable joints, we're very interested in whether they're symptomatic or non-symptomatic. So, if they're symptomatic, the client is complaining of something. If they're non-symptomatic, the client is not complaining of something. And when we evaluate them, they can be compromised or not compromised. They can be compromised or not. This one's symptomatic is they're affecting the client's life. So it's fairly normal that, oh, okay, it's symptomatic. Is it compromised or is it not compromised? But this one here, the non-symptomatic compromised joint, is the really interesting one. Because the client's not complaining of anything, but we found something. And we know that if we can help energy move through this more easily by introducing a fulcrum, we have the intention to help, but we carry it out through attention, then we're sorting out issues from the future. We may even be sorting out a wide broadcast from this. They may not know there's an issue in there, but they're having to compromise around it anyway. It's not painful, it's not symptomatic for them, but they are still having to adjust things in their lives around it
So
without
that's
knowing.
probably the root of other things they're experiencing.
So we can have a neck which we don't even know is restricted. It's not painful, but we're having to turn in the car slightly differently to look over our shoulder. We're having to do this. We can't necessarily look as far over as we'd like, so our driving is compromised and there are more risks in our life. And the client gets off the couch with a non-symptomatic compromised joint. When we release it, they go, oh, I feel quite different, but I'm not sure why. Because they've not even been aware of it. Does that make sense? On the symptomatics, we can have a compromised joint or a non-compromised joint, and some of it's because it's structural and some of it's because it's energetic.